Why is it that the sharpest minds are often the most silent in the crowd? Why do those who see the most tend to walk alone? It is not because they are unloved. It is not because they are unwanted. It is because the world fears what it cannot manipulate, and smart people, truly smart people, are unmovable. From an early age, they begin to feel it, the sting of alienation, the dull ache of being surrounded by noise that has no depth. They try at first to blend in, to laugh at the jokes, to nod at the absurd rules, but the deeper their mind grows, the more unbearable the charade becomes. The smarter a person is, the less willing they are to betray their authenticity for a seat at the table of fools. Intelligence does not simply mean knowing facts. It means seeing the patterns no one else sees. It means recognizing the hidden motives in a smile, the threat behind a compliment, the control embedded in kindness. And once you see these things, you cannot unsee them. You cannot return to blind allegiance or ignorant bliss. The smart person becomes like a soldier stationed behind enemy lines, knowing every handshake might be a setup and every alliance a trap. So they withdraw not in fear but in strategy. They choose isolation not because they hate people, but because they refuse to be corrupted by them. In the silence of solitude they hear truth. In the absence of distraction they refine power. People chase acceptance. They crave applause, approval, and attention. But the intelligent soul sees the cost of these things: self-betrayal. The smart person understands that most of society is built on illusions, on groupthink, on the performance of virtue rather than the practice of it. They watch as men sell their peace for popularity, and women abandon their strength for validation. And they refuse to follow suit. The smart person would rather walk alone in truth than be celebrated in a theater of lies. And for that, they are feared, misunderstood, even hated, but they are also free, and freedom to the wise is more precious than love. You will often find the intelligent man standing still while the crowd runs. You will see him observing rather than reacting, thinking rather than posting, waiting rather than chasing. Why? Because he knows that most of what the world desires is bait, and every bait hides a hook. He knows that emotions are weapons, that those who beg for your empathy often seek your obedience. He knows that drama is engineered, that chaos is orchestrated, and that loud voices often cover empty souls. So he stays detached, not from life, but from delusion, and in doing so, he gains something few ever do: clarity. Solitude is not loneliness, it is sovereignty, and that is why the intelligent man is so dangerous. He does not need the tribe. He does not require your praise to feel whole. His strength is internal, and that threatens every external system that relies on control. Look closely at the lives of the wisest people you know. They are often minimal, deliberate, and silent. Not because they lack opportunity, but because they understand energy. They know that every conversation costs attention, every relationship risks erosion, and every exposure invites distortion. So they become selective. Precise, and yes, alone. But not all isolation is chosen. Some of it is imposed. The world rejects what it cannot mold. It fears what it cannot label. And smart people, by their very nature, are unlabelable. You cannot control someone who sees the game. You cannot manipulate a mind that studies the puppeteer, not just the puppet. So, society pushes them out, not always overtly. Sometimes it's through quiet disinterest. Sometimes through betrayal, sometimes through constant misunderstanding. The smart person learns early that authenticity is punished, not praised, and that if they want peace they must walk alone. Yet this isolation does not weaken them, it hardens them. It becomes their crucible. In solitude they build discipline. They learn to control their emotions, not be controlled by them. They study human nature, not from textbooks, but through direct observation of betrayal, fear, envy, and desire. They become students of power, not just in theory, but in its raw, psychological mechanics. They understand that the world is not driven by justice, but by interest, and so they stop expecting fairness. They stop needing closure. They stop playing games where the rules are made by those who benefit from your loss. This transformation is not a fall, it is a rise. As the smart person withdraws from the noise, they enter deeper chambers of self-awareness. They no longer react, they calculate. They no longer beg, they observe. They no longer fight for acceptance. They become the standard others try to match. The solitude that once felt like exile becomes their kingdom. They are not alone because they are broken. They are alone because they are unbreakable. And still, the world watches them with suspicion, because the man who does not flinch cannot be provoked. The man who is not tempted cannot be bought. The man who is not reactive cannot be controlled. These are the dangerous ones, the ones who walk in silence but carry within them the sharpest sword of all, discernment. They have learned that the loudest man is usually the weakest, that the friendliest face often hides the coldest heart, and that the most righteous voices often mask the most corrupt agendas. And with that knowledge, they become untouchable. No, smart people are not always alone because they want to be, but because their clarity makes illusion unbearable, their mind dissects deception, their instincts resist corruption, and their spirit refuses to kneel. They have learned the sacred truth that most spend their lives avoiding, that power begins when the need for company ends. The one who walks alone learns to walk with destiny. The one who is not distracted becomes the one who cannot be stopped. So they watch, they wait, they build. In the shadows where no one claps, they craft the kind of character that outlives empires. They are not chasing the world, they are outlasting it. And in their silence, in their solitude, in the space the world calls loneliness, they find the throne the crowd will never see. And if you follow the same path, if you choose clarity over comfort, power over popularity, and peace over performance, you will lose many things. But you will gain one thing that cannot be bought, faked, or stolen. You will become untouchable. True intelligence reveals the cruelty of conformity and the hollowness of social validation. The deeper a mind sees into the structure of society, the more it recognizes that much of what the world calls connection is merely synchronized survival. It's not about truth, it's about harmony, even if that harmony is built on delusion. The intelligent person over time begins to notice that conversations rarely explore truth. They revolve around mutual reassurance. People don't seek knowledge, they seek affirmation. The social animal wants to feel safe, validated, and superior, often in that order. And so, the group enforces an unspoken contract. Do not question what we all pretend to believe, or we will turn against you. Intelligence becomes the original sin, the curse of seeing the invisible strings behind polite smiles and group laughter. The smart person realizes that most human interaction is performance, and that makes participation unbearable. They cannot pretend they don't see what they see. They cannot unlearn the way the herd functions, rewarding obedience, punishing dissent, dressing up conformity as virtue, and demonizing independence as arrogance. The smarter you are, the less tolerance you have for falsehood. Not just the obvious lies, but the elegant, socially acceptable ones, the kind wrapped in diplomacy, the ones that earn applause. A truly intelligent person doesn't just read between the lines, they rewrite them. They don't accept a handshake at face value, they analyze the grip, the motive, the context. They don't just listen to what people say, they hear what they are avoiding. And in a world where most people are addicted to distraction and terrified of introspection, this depth is threatening. It breaks the spell. The intelligent person becomes a mirror too sharp for comfort. They reflect people's insecurities, hidden intentions, and unconscious behaviors simply by being aware. And because most people cannot handle that level of scrutiny, they retreat. Or worse, they attack. So, the intelligent person learns early and often that clarity is punished and honesty is a threat to the collective illusion. But this is not just a psychological burden, it is a social sentence. Because the smarter you are, the more unbearable small talk becomes, the more suffocating pretense feels. You begin to crave conversations with substance, presence without posturing, relationships without agendas. And you discover just how rare those things truly are. People aren't looking for depth, they're looking for comfort. They're not drawn to your intelligence, they're intimidated by it, because intelligence questions everything, and questioning everything is disruptive. It pulls at the threads people have spent their lives stitching into masks. To survive in society, most people learn to dilute themselves, to smile when they want to scream, to agree when they want to resist, to shrink when they want to expand. But the intelligent person finds that dilution unbearable. They cannot reduce themselves without dying inside, and so they begin to drift, away from crowds, away from applause, away from the safety of belonging. The conformity that binds society together becomes a psychological prison for the intelligent. The rituals of daily life, office politics, social media, posturing, empty gestures of connection, become intolerable. They feel fake, they feel hollow, and over time, the intelligent person begins to feel like an alien in their own culture, not because they're better, but because they're different, because they ask why when others say just do it, because they crave reality when others are addicted to perception, because they chase essence while others collect symbols, and the more they search for truth, the more they are met with resistance. Truth, after all, is costly. It dismantles comfort, it challenges identity, and it erodes social order. And so, the intelligent person is marked, not with celebration but suspicion. Their insights are not welcomed. They are tolerated at best, ridiculed at worst. Social validation, to the intelligent person, begins to feel like a game rigged for the lowest bidder. Popularity is achieved not by being profound, but by being palatable. The more you resemble others, the more you are embraced. And so, the smart person faces a decision: join the herd and fake agreement, or stand apart and face solitude. Most choose the former, but the few who refuse, the ones who keep their minds sharp, their words honest, their standards high, they pay the price in isolation. And yet, they would rather walk alone in truth than sleep among those who never question the dream. Because once you see the hollow center of social validation, no applause can fill the void. You begin to understand that validation is a leash, and that being loved for who you pretend to be is a cage dressed in flowers. True intelligence breaks that illusion, and in doing so, breaks the need to belong, not out of arrogance, but out of integrity. Isolation becomes the price for independence, clarity, and emotional control. The intelligent mind, once awakened, cannot operate on autopilot like the masses do. It begins to make decisions not based on comfort or conformity, but on consequence, logic, and long-term strategy. And that very shift separates it from others. Emotional detachment becomes necessary, not because the smart person is cold, but because they must insulate themselves from the volatility that emotional entanglements often bring. People, for the most part, react emotionally first and reflect later, if at all. The intelligent individual reverses this process. They reflect deeply and then respond with precision, or sometimes not at all. And this controlled stillness, this unshakable composure, makes them unreadable, and unreadable people are often misjudged as distant or arrogant. But the truth is, they have simply learned that closeness without discernment is chaos in disguise. This emotional self-mastery is developed through solitude. It is in silence that the intelligent person learns to watch themselves, to observe their own reactions, triggers, biases, and patterns. They begin to dismantle the narratives fed to them by their environment. They question why they feel what they feel. They study pain instead of drowning in it. They analyze heartbreak instead of glorifying it. They convert rejection into reflection. But this process cannot happen in crowds. It cannot happen in environments where emotional manipulation is normalized and validation is transactional. That's why the intelligent mind seeks distance, not because it despises people, but because it values clarity. And clarity, by its nature, demands space. Every time the intelligent individual has stepped too close to emotionally chaotic people, they have paid the price in confusion, instability, and lost time. So now, they walk alone, not out of bitterness, but from the wisdom of self-preservation. Independence of mind requires independence of heart, and that detachment doesn't grow in convenience, it grows through discomfort. The smart person has often been through emotional storms, betrayals that others call accidents, but they recognize as patterns. They've seen how feelings are weaponized, how guilt is used to extract submission, how affection is given with strings attached, how loyalty is demanded by those who offer none in return. Over time, the intelligent individual builds internal walls, not to block love, but to filter truth from performance. They learn to observe instead of absorb. They no longer respond to emotional bait. They do not explain themselves to those who are committed to misunderstanding them. They remain still where others would have erupted, and this emotional discipline begins to unsettle those around them. Because in a world that thrives on reaction, those who don't react are feared, and eventually excluded. The cost of this inner mastery is often mistaken for aloofness. Relationships become fewer, but more intentional. Interactions grow shorter, but more meaningful. The smart person realizes that their peace is more important than being understood. They don't attend every gathering. They don't maintain shallow friendships. They don't engage in battles that have no strategic outcome, and as they become more emotionally self-sufficient, others begin to fall away, not because of any overt conflict, but because there is no longer a dependency to sustain the connection. When you stop needing others to regulate your emotional state, you become invisible to those who were only interested in controlling it. And with each silent goodbye, the intelligent person moves deeper into solitude, not as a punishment, but as a path to sovereignty. Clarity is not just about understanding others, it's about understanding yourself, and that level of self-knowledge is uncomfortable, even painful at times. It requires the intelligent person to confront their own flaws, to dismantle their own illusions, to reject their own past conditioning. This process is rarely shared because few are willing to go that deep. Emotional control, then, is not just about restraint, it is about transformation. It is about becoming the kind of person who does not need to react, prove, or perform to protect their sense of self. But reaching that point means walking alone for long stretches, enduring misunderstanding, and bearing the weight of one's own emotional evolution. There is no applause in solitude, no comforting echo chamber to validate the path. But there is strength, quiet, sharp, indestructible strength, the kind that no betrayal can shake, the kind that no chaos can penetrate, the kind that comes only when a person learns to choose logic over longing, truth over comfort, and growth over attachment. This isolation is not exile, it is evolution. It is the price the intelligent mind willingly pays to become emotionally sovereign, because only in that sovereignty can one become immune to manipulation, immune to drama, immune to the emotional games that bind most people to mediocrity. And the intelligent person would rather walk alone in mastery than be surrounded in emotional slavery. The powerful mind chooses solitude not from weakness, but from strategic self-preservation. It is not loneliness that drives the intelligent person into isolation, it is precision. It is a calculated withdrawal from the noise of society, where mediocrity is normalized. Manipulation is disguised as connection, and truth is the enemy of comfort. The smart individual sees that every interaction, every environment, every relationship carries with it an energy cost, a potential distortion to their clarity, focus, and control. And so, they begin to treat their presence like currency. They no longer waste it on situations where the return is chaos, dilution, or distraction. They do not retreat because they are fragile. They retreat because they refuse to be contaminated. They understand that when a powerful mind enters a room, it is either elevated or eroded. There is no neutrality, and so, rather than gamble with their own strength, they remove themselves altogether. In solitude, they sharpen themselves. Like a blade unsheathed only for purpose, the intelligent mind withdraws to hone its edges. This sharpening is not visible to the world because it is internal. It is a slow refinement of perspective, emotional control, and pattern recognition. The solitude they choose is not an escape from life. It is a return to command. In the absence of noise, the intelligent person becomes aware of how their energy is being siphoned. Through trivial conversations, emotional blackmail, meaningless obligations, and the silent pressure to conform. They begin to understand that most people's lives are owned, not by governments, not by corporations, but by the subtle demands of their social environments. And so, the intelligent individual opts out. Not in protest, but in silence. They see that the more they engage with the world's distractions, the more diluted their vision becomes. And so, they sever the threads, gently, deliberately, unapologetically. This form of isolation is not passive. It is active defense. It is the refusal to be predictable, to be emotionally read like an open book. The intelligent mind becomes aware that the less others know about you, the less power they have over you. So they cultivate mystery. They speak less but mean more. They appear less but move more. They do not react because they are not exposed. Solitude becomes their fortress, impenetrable to gossip, impervious to manipulation, and immune to the influence of lesser minds. In this fortress, the intelligent individual regains what the world constantly tries to steal: inner authority. When others look outward for validation, for permission, for direction, the smart one looks inward. And in doing so becomes dangerous, because no one can control a person who needs nothing from them. Every time the intelligent person has allowed themselves to be too visible, too accessible, they have witnessed the same outcome: expectation. People begin to believe they are entitled to access to explanation, to emotional labor. And the intelligent individual realizes that most relationships are contracts written in invisible ink, where love is traded for obedience, attention is given for conformity, and peace is withheld to ensure compliance. They choose solitude because it breaks that contract. It removes the ability of others to negotiate their worth. It frees them from being a product of others' demands. It allows them to build a life that is designed from the inside out, not the outside in. And this is what terrifies society the most: someone who creates their reality without permission. What many call solitude, the powerful mind calls control. Control over time, energy, emotion, and focus. Control over what enters and what is expelled. Control over who gets access and who remains in the distance. The intelligent person uses this control not to dominate others, but to preserve themselves. Because they know how rare their clarity is, how sharp their insight, how vital their peace. They protect it like a king protects a kingdom, vigilantly, relentlessly, silently. And the more they protect it, the stronger they become. Not loud, not boastful, but unshakable. And when the world tries to provoke them with loneliness, with guilt, with pressure, they do not budge, because they have already done the math. They know the cost of connection without alignment, of proximity without purpose, of presence without peace. And they are no longer willing to pay it. To choose solitude is to choose autonomy. It is to declare that you will not be shaped by accidental environments or emotional hostage situations. It is to design your own rhythm, your own code, your own hierarchy of values. The intelligent person does not wait for a crisis to escape the noise. They preemptively retreat, because they see it all before it happens. They anticipate betrayal. They sense manipulation. They decode intentions. And in doing so, they realize that the highest form of power is not in conquering others, but in refusing to be conquered by them. Solitude for the smart is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of self. And when that self is whole, grounded, and unswayed, it becomes the most dangerous force in the world. A mind that cannot be moved, a soul that cannot be sold.